Today, we're thrilled to feature Ben Wolfe, a bassist, composer, bandleader, and educator whose music seamlessly blends the elegance of chamber music with the soul of jazz. With a career spanning collaborations with legends like Wynton Marsalis and Diana Krall, Grammy-winning recordings, and a catalog of over 100 original works, Ben's artistry continues to inspire audiences worldwide. In addition to his acclaimed album and compositions, Ben's dedication to nurturing the next generation of jazz artists as a faculty at the Juilliard School solidifies his legacy as a cornerstone of the jazz community. So get ready to explore the mind of a true jazz visionary. So Ben, good to see you. Happy Wednesday. Happy New Year.
Good to see you as well. Thanks for having me. I'm looking
My,
forward to it.
yeah, my pleasure. Ben, the first time I heard you play, it's probably going back, I would say, 15 or so years ago. Can you, or even maybe even be further than that? A great band when you were playing at the Jazz Gallery with Orrin Evans, with
Mhm.
Jeff Tain Watts and Steve Wilson, Ralph Bowen. So great chance for me to get exposed to your music. So do you remember the that gig I'm talking about specifically?
I do. That was a significant gig, actually. Orrin Evans and I have played a lot of music together. He's on several of my recordings. I'm on his recordings. We've done all kind of things. One of my closest friends. So, but that was the first time, other than playing at a jam session once in Philly, or a time he called me for a possible record date because the bassist was probably not going to make it. Little things, but that was the first time we really worked together or played together on a gig, and so I remember very clearly. It was like the beginning of a musical partnership that day. So that was a lot of fun. We even played one of my tunes that we ended up recording many years later on that session. Actually, he's not on that recording, but anyway, yes, I remember.
And isn't that so funny that that's the first time that
Yeah.
I heard you play?
That's funny.
Yeah. So, now that we're going back about 15 years, clearly there is, I mean, 15 years forward, there clearly is this chemistry that you have with him. Now, as a bass player, you know, there's just a natural chemistry that we have with certain drummers, I would say.
Yeah.
So, talk to me about how you feel your relationship with the drums works. What do you look for in a drummer that makes you feel comfortable? Because, the bass and the drums, that's the heart and soul in a sense.
Yeah, I think I love drummers. I think drums are the one of the few instruments, the drum set born out of jazz music. Um, I love the drums, and I also find the drums the hardest band member to find in a funny way. And for me, it's not a simple equation because depending on if it's my band, depending on the music we're playing, what the conception is, how I'm writing, it could be different. Different drummers offer different things. I mean, as far as my groups, I've had several drummers that have been very important to the music we were playing at the time. So originally, I had several, but I did a few records with Greg Hutchinson on drums, and I felt we had a special connection, and that came from uh, I knew him when he was very young. I was very young, but I was older than him. I met him when he was a teenager. Then I just moved to New York, and we started, and he played great, but we didn't really play together until we played together with Eric Reed's trio,
Mm.
and it felt great. So I used him on a few records, and we had a thing.
I,
So
I
that
kind of feel that. I mean, you could tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm not. Do the bass and drums kind of have to almost have a marriage in a sense? Because I heard the way McCoy Tyner talked about uh, Elvin Jones and Jimmy Garrison. He said they were buddies. That's his exact words. Is this sort of a special relationship in a sense, right?
I think so. Yes, I do. I agree with that. But at the same time, I also think for a band to be great, everyone's got to be connected. And the connections may be different based on the instrument itself, but I think a great group has to function like a team. It's so I agree, but I think that's true with all the instruments in different ways though. But if the bass player and drummer aren't playing together, you're in trouble. Like
Yeah, absolutely.
that's not going to work.
The soloists don't feel free, and it has to be, and it's both of them together. So, When you started playing the bass, did you know that you were going to be a jazz bassist from the get-go? Like when you started actually getting into the mechanics and just learning to play the instrument, was that
No,
something you
no,
could
no,
sense?
not at all. The way I got to it is very unorthodox. I started playing music in seventh grade because my best friend was a musician, and we were really competitive with each other, like sports or whatever. And I was like, man, I can play in a band. It was like, oh yeah, it was that kind of thing. And I went and played like bells at a concert with the seventh grade band or something. And then I started playing. And he was my teacher, my friend in seventh grade. Every day at lunch, we went in the practice room. I was playing tuba. And at that point, the very beginning, I really didn't know that people, I didn't know if someone played music in the school band and had plans to do another thing until I was a sophomore in high school. I didn't know that existed. I just assumed I'm a musician now,
Yeah.
kind of thing. So I got into the weird way. So when I got to high school, 2 years later, the high school band director just informed me, you're also playing string bass and electric bass. Here's a teacher. And he started me the summer before freshman year. He told me I'm playing all these different things.
So he told you this is what you're going to do.
Yeah, basically. He said, I
Yeah.
want you to do this and you're going to do that. And I was like, okay, okay. I mean, I guess I was talented on a certain level. I mean, but it was just, in my mind, I was a musician now. Okay, I'll do these things. I wasn't really into the acoustic bass then. Wasn't playing any jazz, but my father was a classical violinist at one time in his life, and he loved jazz music. So he played me jazz records before I was playing the acoustic bass. But in high school, playing electric bass. I started working gigs when I was in high school on electric bass. Had funk bands, different kind of things. Started playing bass trombone, and this stuff started morphing. And later on, like I was out of high school when I could play the acoustic bass, but it wasn't like I hadn't found my home, so to speak. So once I got started playing a lot of jazz, and that's what I really wanted to do after being in top 40 bands and all that, it became this thing where obviously I have to play acoustic bass. But a thing that happened when I was in high school, in one of those stage band competitions, probably like my sophomore, junior year, something, electric bassist in the stage band. So we play an account bassy thing at a high school competition, and the band director said, "Well, you should probably play the acoustic bass on this." Okay, whatever. So we go to the competition, and they're like, I didn't have an amp or a pickup. We didn't have, the '70s, they didn't have it. I didn't know what that was. So they put a mic in front of their bass, and the judges were like, "Wow, that's great. You're just playing acoustic." And my dad was like, you're going to end up, that's what I'm like, what are you guys talking? It didn't even dawn on me, but that's what I do now. Like I don't use an amp. I don't use a pickup. I have a microphone. I actually ended up doing that thing. There was one fluke from a competition, but it wasn't until after high school that I decided I really wanted to play acoustic bass, and I went all the way in, and that was the most I'd ever been clear with my direction, what I wanted to do. So in a funny way, I started late. In a funny way, I didn't. I started music, you know what I mean? But I did start. I mean, seventh grade is late for a lot of people. But then getting to the acoustic bass, not until I was 18, 19 years old. That's late too. But I was hearing Paul Chambers before that because my dad played it for me. I heard Billie Holiday because my dad played it for me. He was playing me all these records.
Do you remember the first time you checked out someone like a Paul Chambers or a Ron Carter, like when you actually went and like saw them up close, that sort of thing?
I remember the first time I heard Paul Chambers and knew it was Paul Chambers. My father played me. Uh, it was Dexterity off of Chambers' music, where him and Coltrane played the melody together. And I was like, wow! Like I remember. I remember. He said that's Paul Chambers. I remember that. I mean, I never saw him live, but I remember that part. I remember the first time I heard Ron Carter live. Certainly, I mean, I've been listening to him on records. I heard him live the first time I came to New York to visit the city to see what it was like. I heard Ron and Cedar Walton play duo at the Knickerbocker. That may be the first time I heard Ron live.
Oh man.
I stood right behind him.
And that was your first trip to New York, like going to.
Yeah, yeah. I came to New York because when I was a kid in Portland playing some gigs, Cecil McBee came in. I'm like, oh, he's on records. Hey, if I come to New York, can I take some lessons with you?
Hmm.
He's like, okay. And so I did. I took a train to New York. You know, it was crazy. That was the first time I went there. Yeah. That was
Yeah,
like
so you
83.
fell in love with it right away when you saw Ron Carter, and you're like, this is where I need to
Well,
be.
even before I saw Ron, I mean, when I heard Ron on records, I loved him.
Hmm.
But once I started, I was listening to the records when I was playing electric bass, but it all made more sense when I switched to acoustic bass.
Yeah, but and you say you started late, and and then you thought seventh grade, but yet you're one of the most important jazz bass players in the music, and it's funny how we see ourselves and how the
Yeah.
world sees us, in a sense. So when you actually started to do your first jazz gigs and you were playing acoustic, um, did it feel natural, or did it feel like were there certain aspects that you found really challenging right away? Like what were you trying, like obstacles were you trying to overcome in the beginning that you kind of remember specifically?
When I switched to acoustic bass and started getting gigs, the obstacle and what felt uncomfortable was I didn't know how to play the instrument.
The
It
physical
was very
aspects, you mean?
physical aspect of the instrument. I was getting blisters. I hadn't really studied yet. I mean, I didn't. It was new, the instrument itself. But then I started taking lessons, private lessons of classical bassist. But just the endurance of it, and I was still hadn't been playing that long. Long. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, I had a lot to learn, regardless of that part of it. So I had to catch up quickly on the bass itself, technique of it. But I was so 100% into doing this. Like it was my life in some way. I wasn't at that. There was a several year period where I wasn't thinking about. I wasn't going to movies. I was. It was. I was just trying to play, for the most part.
Yeah, I mean I kind of feel like that has to happen. We have that moment where like something just clicks and it's like we know this is what we want to do for the rest of our lives. And everyone has their story. Like for me, I saw this rock guitar player Joe Satriani play at PNC in Homedale, New Jersey, and I was just like I got hypnotized right then and there that I wanted to
Yeah.
be a musician. Did you have a moment like that where it was like, you get that it's like a calling in a sense, like this is what I'm gonna do,
I never thought there was a choice.
mm.
I never didn't have that feeling from that first day in seventh grade. I didn't know if I didn't know my brain didn't have anything but that.
Wow.
It just didn't. It's no different was I could do it. Like when I was playing baseball, little league baseball, in my mind, yes, I'm going to be on the Orioles, whatever like kids do. But with music, it was different because I could feel that I could do it.
Yeah.
But I never just hey, I think I'll make this a career. I didn't know there was an option. I don't know why I looked at it that way. I never viewed it any different way. So those kind of moments weren't so much about what I was going to do, but it was the clarity of how I was going to do it. That became the acoustic bass became clear.
Mm. And
Later on, not using the amp became clear. Like
yeah.
there's more of those kind of things.
And we talked about, you worked with Orrin Evans, but I think it's very, we really should talk, you've worked with a lot of singers before.
Hmm.
A lot of bassists, they want to work with singers because there's consistent work there. They can maybe look at themselves as an accompanist in a sense.
Hmm.
Um, Do you kind of look at that as a separate challenge, as playing like with a trio in a sense, like when you're working with the singer, or you're just I'm a bassist and I'm just in the moment right now. Like, do you see a separation when you work with singers in a sense?
Uh, Maybe I don't really look at it quite that way, but I mean, I try to view everything as if I'm accompanying, even when I'm soloing. Because I feel like if everyone in the band is that aware of each other, then the possibilities of where the music can go. Like if you're playing ensemble music, it's always an ensemble.
Hmm.
That's how I view it. I mean, I remember Donald Edwards said this, the drummer. I used to play with him for a lot. Uh, he used to always say this thing like the bass solo is kind of like a drum and bass duet when we can do what we do.
Right.
So looking at things more ensemble oriented. But as far as playing with singers, I do love playing with singers because it presents different challenges, especially as a young musician, when maybe you're not, maybe playing 12 keys isn't comfortable yet. Maybe you don't know the song, that kind of stuff. And I learned a lot from singers. I mean, I remember when I first came to New York, I was working with Dakota Staten, singer, and she was really intense with tough love. Like downbeats will really need to be loud and strong. She might curse me out on the break tune. It was great. I learned a lot. I played with just singer Jimmy Scott. I learned a lot playing. I learned a lot from the older singers who had way more experience than me. So I learned from that, I guess, the pressure to get the job done
Yeah.
for the singer.
And
I love that.
you learned a lot as you're saying, and education is such a important part of what you do as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
even like there's one video of you on YouTube talking about like just walking on F7. You know what I'm
Oh,
talking
yeah,
about that
yeah.
video?
Yeah, I was talking about the Ron Carter lesson.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Um,
I've never seen the video. I've seen one little clip from it.
yeah. No, I think it's such a valuable video. I mean, I think like there's so much information in that clip. Um, but that's definitely music related and theory related and stuff like, but when you're mentoring somebody, a bass player who you see has the potential to really be a professional and contribute to the
Mhm.
music, what do you think they should know that's sort of unconventional that they might that they're going to say that's what I learned from Ben Wolfe? Anything come to mind that you wanted them to?
I don't know. I can tell you what I do. The things I encourage strongly are you got to fall in love with bass lines.
Mm,
There's like this obsession with soloing, which is not what we do. I love bass solo. Then it gets turned into Ben Wolfe hates bass solo. I love bass solos. But what I say a lot to bass students, I might say, if you, and again, my opinion, people may disagree, but I say if you look at the greatest bass soloists, uh, Paul Chambers, Oscar Pettiford, Jimmy Blanton, Ray Brown. Let's take those four. If they never took a bass solo ever, I would love them. I believe I would love them just as much, and I would hear just as much as their personality. Then I say, do you ever listen to Israel Crosby with Ahmed Jamal Trio? I say, oh yeah, 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 yeah. I say, do you ever get mad he didn't get a solo on those records?
mm.
No, because it's not about that. But that's not to say Paul Chambers, Jimmy Blanton, Ray Brown, Oscar Pever didn't play beautiful, great solos. They did. But the fact is, bass and drums, and we play every beat of every song essentially for the whole gig.
Yeah.
So if you're playing in a quintet, the two horn players, they don't do that. So, to me, there's a bass solo and a drum solo every song. So now we're playing. We get to play what we do constantly, and now we want to do some stuff alone. Like that's a lot
Yeah.
because we're already doing it. But what we're doing is we're doing our parts, and it's almost like this thing where the attitude is when you're playing the bass part, you're not really doing your thing. You're not really expressing yourself. You don't have the freedom to whatever. But that's like saying a soloist, the horn player doesn't, if they didn't solo and they only played the melody, they didn't get a chance to express them. It doesn't make sense. To me, it doesn't make sense. That's not anti-solo. It's pro bass line. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the greatest soloists were the greatest bass line creators.
Yeah, I mean, you're improvising while you play the line when you're walking, you're making those lines up on the spot, so it's
And if you prefer soloing to the bass lines, why are you playing the bass? If you prefer drum solos to the drum part, for me personally, for my conception of music, there are some conflicts there.
yeah. And I mean, that's the thing too. I mean, is it going more in the direction of like people want to hear like, well, not people want to hear the bassists are too preoccupied with their getting their bass solos together than the actual lines themselves when
Well,
their role is the bass player. That's your role.
possibly. I can tell you this much. Sometimes the bass players appear to be just waiting to solo when they're not soloing.
Well, yeah.
Now, I remember Ray Brown, when I first met Ray, my first lesson with Ray Brown, he said to me, yeah, you young guys, you just say to yourself, I'll just walk. I remember thinking in my head, that's exactly what I think. Like the audacity, I'll just walk, like it's some easy thing. I'm like, wow, I don't really work on it. Like it opened up this whole, like, it exposed so much ignorance in the way I was thinking at the time. It wasn't even like, I didn't even think about it a certain way. And he was right. It's not that simple. It's a lifetime of understanding, and you got to be in love with this. So I encourage that with students. And I also, I was fortunate to study with Ray Brown, and I was fortunate to study with Ron Carter. I was fortunate to have a friendship with Leroy Vinegar, and some of those things I try to, I can't be them, but I can pass on what I learned from them in my lessons, and then add what I picked up myself along the way. But really, teaching, the students got to do the work. It's like they have to practice, study, whatever it is they need to do to get to where they want to go. And I feel like hopefully I can give them information, to help.
Yeah. And Juilliard is, such a respected institution, and the level of musicianship is so high at Juilliard. Um, Times are changing in the last, with technology and everything, and people are
Definitely.
learning much faster.
They're
Has that
learning
made you have
certain
to,
things much faster.
what? What was that?
They're learning certain things much faster,
Certain things.
perhaps.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because the music doesn't get better. You know, certain things seem to come faster, but I don't know.
No,
It's,
but I mean, with that, the advent of technology and they're learning certain, does that make you have to, you know, does it make the process harder for you as a teacher or easier? Like, do you feel like your role is changing over the last couple of years, or you're just doing what you do?
I always look at it the same. I'm not sure. I mean, uh, the way I teach is I don't just have one little method. I try to deal with the individual. So each person is different. But I don't feel like it's hindering me anything. I mean, whoever someone, I like to look at people's, including my own, strengths and weaknesses and try to attack the weaknesses and try to understand the strengths or that kind of stuff. So the technology thing, depending on how it's used, there's certain things I don't think are good. I think are damaging, particularly with young musicians. I very much dislike tuners where you're tuning with your eyes with a needle. I think if you're in high school or younger, and that's how you learn to tune your instrument, I don't think you're doing your ears any service. I think it's a disservice. I think it's better to struggle through trying to figure out if you're in tune or not
Tune
than
to
to
the
just.
piano is what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying tune with sound.
Mm.
Tuners have, like, you look at the needle, right?
Right, right,
And
right. Back and
when it's in, or when it will tell you when you're in tune. It's not, you don't hear it and say, ah, that sounds good. Once the song starts, you have to adjust anyway. At some point, you got to use your ears. So I don't like the tuners, and I don't like the. Now, I'm not saying any of these things are can't be useful, but as a rule, always tuning to a tuner, I think that can cause problems. I think playing with play-alongs can be difficult. I think that can cause problems. It doesn't have to, but I think a lot of young musicians, they think they're making music when they're doing that.
no way, no
But
way, no.
if the people don't hear each other and you don't think about it that way, it's possible you're training yourself how to play patterns on chord changes while ignoring the band because there's no interaction.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I've
you
thought
got to
about
know
this
them.
for years and years and years. Like, whether it's,
Ingersoll's like that.
yeah, like there is nothing like in this world that can replicate. I don't care if you can filter, like I've been, they're using this one app for fun at home, like filtering out like Grant Green and playing along with these
You can
recordings. It's
learn from
fun.
that. You learn a
Yeah,
lot from it.
yeah. But there is nothing that will replicate the in person with people in front of an audience.
Exactly. I agree.
Nothing.
I think the practice, the big divide for me is practicing, is training your instincts. It's almost selfish. It's all about you in a good way. And the list is long of the things you can work on. But the mindset is all about you. You got to be hyper aware of what you're doing, what you're trying to get better at, whatever the case may be. When you're on the bandstand, it's the opposite. It's no longer about you. It's about
Mhm.
us. It's about hearing what's going on and reacting with clarity. And it's like a different thing. And I find that, or I think perhaps that can be difficult when you're practicing is playing with able to play along and you're not thinking in terms of this isn't actually what I'm going to do in the bandstand. I'm just working on X, Y, or Z. I think it's important to have clarity in your practicing and your studying. Now, at the same time, I say that I love playing with records, not transcribing, just putting it on and playing along with it. I learned a lot from doing that. I knew they couldn't hear me, but at the same time, I'm now listening intensely to whichever drummer it is and playing along, so there are lessons to be learned.
I think it's more value improvising with just by yourself with no one except you than it would be with a play along. It's more you would get more just by
I think
yourself,
it's
I
different.
think.
I think it's different. Perhaps you're right, but I know playing along with records, I learned a lot.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm hearing, I'm playing along with whatever, Round About Midnight album. I'm hearing Red Garland doing all that comping. I'm listening to the record from like a closer point of view. It would feel like
Yeah.
playing by yourself, different lessons. Each thing supplies different lessons for yourself.
Yeah, you've said some things on this podcast I've never heard anyone say before.
Uh-oh.
It's no, it's great. I love it. It's beautiful, and that's why you're such a special musician because you're thinking about these things. It's about us on the bandstand,
Completely.
and it's about the bass line. It's about fall in love with the bass line.
Yeah, man.
You
Look,
know,
I was taught to listen to myself last, and if everyone does that, we're all listening to each other.
yeah. Listen to yourself last
Listen to
is
yourself
basic.
last. Or I was taught, I'm very visual because I have a synesthesia. I see sound, right? So I was see the whole thing, not just right where we are. The whole, like, look at the whole thing like a painting. It's like, but what's going on though? What's going around you, on around you is so important. That's everything.
Mhm.
You know, if you're playing with a drummer and you don't listen to him, you're not really playing. You're just playing at the same time.
Now, Ben, this has been such a great conversation. I want to thank you so much for, coming on today. We got so much in this short period of time. It's a lot. People will be learning a lot about, things they can improve on and learning about you. And, thank you so much for being a guest today. I really appreciate
My
it.
pleasure. My pleasure.